In just his second season as a pro, AJ Terrell put the league on notice by recording some of the best coverage statistics we've seen over the last decade. When targeted in coverage, Terrell only allowed 200 total yards all season long, which not only ranked first in the league by a wide margin, but was also the lowest amount of yards allowed by a cornerback who played over 750 snaps since Nnamdi Asomugha in 2010. Terrell took lockdown to a whole new level by also allowing a completion percentage of under 44%, an average yards per reception of 6.9, and a passer rating of 47.5. He ranked first in the NFL in all of the aforementioned stat categories, and in most of them, it wasn't even close. In terms of coverage, he was by far the best corner in the league last season, and what makes his sophomore campaign even more mind-boggling is the fact that he was downright terrible as a rookie. In 2020, Terrell allowed 901 total yards in coverage, which was good for dead last among corners who were on the field for at least 750 snaps. He ranked 42nd of 49 qualifiers in allowed completion percentage and 41st in allowed passer rating. PFF didn't start tracking this data until 2006, so the numbers only go back so far, but I don't think we've ever seen a single season jump like this from a corner in the history of the league. So this week, the question that I set out to answer was, what caused Terrell to make such an unprecedented single season jump? Now, to answer that question, we need to understand more than just Terrell's performance in a vacuum. So let me begin by explaining the role that defensive scheme played both in Terrell's difficulty as a rookie and in his dominance later on. In 2020, the Falcons' defensive coaching staff was led by defensive guru Dan Quinn. Along with Gus Bradley and Pete Carroll, Coach Quinn is widely regarded as one of the architects of the legendary Legion of Boom. A coach once told me that the toughest teams to beat are those who can dominate when the opposition knows exactly what's coming. And I don't think there's a better way to describe the Seahawks defense in the early 2010s. Their secondary, consisting of Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, and Earl Thomas, was so talented that they could operate almost exclusively in single high safety coverage shells, and still come out on top down after down. Coach Quinn brought this philosophy to Atlanta when he was hired to be the Falcons head coach in 2015, and Atlanta's defense continued as one of the more single high safety heavy teams in the league through the 2020 season, even after Coach Quinn was fired following their Week 5 loss to Carolina. In true copycat league fashion, the success of the Legion of Boom caused the use of single high structures to explode during the 2010s, and in response, offenses adjusted to take advantage of their weaknesses. Playing corner in a single high structure is one of the most difficult jobs in football because with only one safety offering help over the top, the outside corners are constantly on an island. This leads to situations like the one you see here. On this play, the alignment of Atlanta's defensive backs completely gave away their cover 3 call. The single high safety shell is a clear indication of a single high safety coverage, meaning the defense is in either cover 1 or cover 3, and both outside cornerbacks are leveraged well outside of the respective receivers, which is a dead giveaway for zone coverage. So the cover 3 call could not be more telegraphed. In response to the obvious cover 3 look, Minnesota called a play-action concept known as Yankee, which is specifically designed to kill single high safety structures. It's a concept I've broken down many times on this channel, but in case you're new, here's how it works. The number 1 receiver aligned to the bottom of your screen, Adam Thielen, is running a Dino route, which tells him to fake a corner route to hold the cornerback to his side, then to break back over the top to occupy the deep safety. While Justin Jefferson will run a deep crossing route, which will get into the space vacated by the cornerback responsible for the deep third on the bottom of your screen. That corner is AJ Terrell, and post-snap, you can see that he's put into a really tough situation. Thielen does a great job of keeping his hips angled toward the sideline for as long as possible, which forces Terrell to respect the threat of Thielen getting to the pylon. So by the time Thielen breaks back toward the middle of the field, it's too late for Terrell to trigger on Jefferson's over route underneath him. Even though this 18-yard reception technically counted against Terrell because the catch was made in an area of the field that he was responsible for, it wasn't really his fault. The structure of the defensive coverage concept allowed the offense to know exactly what was coming, and put Terrell in a no-win situation. There were so many plays like this during the 2020 season, where Terrell was put into situations that made it impossible for him to make a play because of the way the defense was structured. Coach Quinn is one of the best minds the game of football has to offer, proven by his resurgence as defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys in 2021. So this is not a knock on him at all, but Atlanta's defensive scheme was far too predictable in 2020, and did not work to the strengths of the Falcons personnel. When current Falcons head coach Arthur Smith took over prior to the 2021 season, he hired Dean Pease to be defensive coordinator. And Coach Pease took a much different approach from the old staff. Compared to 2020, the 2021 Falcons defense used one high shells at a far lower rate, they played less man coverage, they ran less middle of the field closed coverages, and blitzed less. Atlanta called cover 2 at a very high rate in 2021, second to only Houston. And I don't know if I've ever seen a corner who plays the flat in cover 2 better than AJ Terrell. Here, Atlanta shows a 2 high safety shell pre-snap, but will roll into a Tampa 2 cloud post-snap, which tells the strong side safety to drop into a deep half, the slot corner to do the same on the other side, and the weak side safety to play the gap in between the 2 deep half defenders. That leaves the outside cornerbacks responsible for the flats, and one of the biggest weaknesses of any 2 deep coverage is the holes on the sidelines between the deep half defenders and the flat defenders. That's what Tom Brady wants to exploit here, and he can do it with this 4 verticals concept that the Bucs have called. Post-snap, Brady quickly identifies the 2 deep coverage by keying the strong side safety, and he stares down Gronk over the middle to keep that safety cheating toward the middle of the field. That opens up plenty of space for Antonio Brown down the sideline, but because there was no immediate threat in the flat, AJ Terrell was able to sync with the vertical from Brown. Brady's placement of this ball to Brown's back shoulder couldn't have been much better, but Terrell just went up and made a play. Later on in the same game, Tampa called the same concept against the same coverage, and Brady went right after Terrell again. He made a nice throw to Antonio Brown's back shoulder, but again, Terrell got way up to force the incompletion. His spatial awareness in zone coverage is exceptional, which is really apparent on plays where the design of the route concept puts him in conflict, like this play-action bootleg that Carolina ran in the low red zone back in Week 8. The concept calls for a rounded corner route to the back pylon from Robbie Anderson and a fake sift block to the flat from Tommy Tremble. Now, I want you to watch how Terrell plays this concept as the flat defender. Because Anderson has leverage over the safety, Deron Harmon, Terrell knows that he needs to place himself in that throwing lane, so he turns his back to the ball and shuffles toward the pylon. But while he's taking that corner route away, he keeps his eyes underneath because he knows that he's also responsible for the flat. When he sees Tremble get open underneath, he turns his hips to get downhill to hold the play to a gain of just 1 yard. The schematic changes that Coach Pease implemented when he took over in Atlanta put Terrell in a position to succeed more often than that of the scheme in place in 2020. But good NFL defenses are scheme versatile, and will change from week to week based on the strengths and weaknesses of the given opponent. In Week 18, Atlanta went up against New Orleans, who were extremely run-heavy in 2021, and that required them to operate in more single high safety shells to keep the numbers in the box favoring the defense. Like I said earlier, one of the biggest downsides of one high safety shells is they make it very difficult to disguise coverage. And on this play from the second quarter, New Orleans got all the information they needed to identify Atlanta's coverage before taking the snap. Saints running back Alvin Kamara is split out wide at the top of your screen, and the defender lined up opposite him is AJ Terrell, who's obviously a cornerback. And when a corner lines up over a running back, the defense is almost always in zone coverage. Combine the zone identifier with the single high safety shell, and it's safe to assume that Atlanta is in cover 3. New Orleans called a concept called Hoss, which tells the number 1 receiver to run a hitch route while the number 2 runs down the seam. The quarterback's job is to occupy the post safety, and if he does so successfully, the cornerback to that side of the field should be put in conflict between the seam and the hitch. The Saints quarterback Trevor Siemian did a pretty good job with his post-snap process too. After taking the snap, his eyes shot to the number 1 receiver on the other side of the field, which held the post safety enough to open up the seam. This ball should have been placed a little bit further inside, but Terrell made such a great break on the ball that even if it was, he probably would have been there to force the incompletion anyway. With help from the new coaching staff in Atlanta, Terrell made massive strides as a zone coverage defender. In 2020, he was average at best when the defense called zone, but in 2021, he was nothing short of elite, allowing a passer rating of just 7.7. I swear that isn't a typo. But Terrell was a downright liability in man coverage as a rookie, so seeing the jump that he made as a man defender is even more encouraging. During his rookie season, Terrell was way too passive when Atlanta called man. Here, he's lined up opposite Justin Jefferson on the top of your screen, and he does a decent enough job mirroring Jefferson's release off the line of scrimmage. But the gap between himself and the receiver is just too big. When Jefferson broke inside, Terrell reached out to help stay in phase, but there was way too much separation for him to actually make contact. You can see it on this play against Denver as well. This time Terrell is going up against Jerry Jeudy, and when Jeudy breaks back to the ball on this stop route, Terrell goes flying by because he didn't keep a hand on Jeudy through the route to stay in phase. Last season, Terrell was way more physical in man coverage. Here he gets a hand on Deebo Samuel as he releases off the line of scrimmage. Then when Deebo breaks inside, Terrell is all over it to force the incompletion. Watching Terrell in man coverage in 2020 and in 2021 is like watching two different players. As a rookie, he was passive, his reactions were often late, and he'd rarely recognize routes as they develop. But last year, he was physical to the point where he would not only disrupt the timing of routes, but even dictate where the receiver could go. Position aside, I don't know if we've ever seen improvement of this magnitude of any player in the history of the league. The schematic changes implemented by the new coaching staff helped, but this was no fluke. AJ Terrell is a true lockdown corner, and he is here to stay. Thank you so much for watching this week's video. If you'd like to support the channel, you can check out my Patreon and Twitter at the links in the description. But that's all I've got for now, so until next time, peace.